no such thing as a deeply divided society. What we're talking about is deeply divisive politics. And getting our analysis right is crucial in order to be able to make policy prescriptions or to think of solutions, right? So the diagnosis of what is happening is at the core of then trying to think of solutions if we're looking for solutions. There are sectarian parties, there are sectarian organizations, there are sectarian leaders, there are sectarian states, but there are no sects per se that are going against each other. So again, if we know that what is happening is a conflict between actors and not groups, then shouldn't our constitutions, for example, just very basically, if we know that these are the people who are creating conflict, shouldn't the constitutions ban them from the post-war period? Simple, no? I mean, if a party is instigating sectarian conflict, and if we want to solve it, shouldn't we just ban that party? This whole paradigm is saying, we are realistic, we are pragmatic, we look at things the way they are, and therefore, because this is what it is, we have to deal with it. But surprise, surprise, this is not really enduring. I mean, just look at the history of Lebanon. In less than 100 years, Lebanon has had 4 main shifts in sectarian dichotomies. From Druze Maronite to Sunni Maronite to Christian Muslim to Sunni Shia, right? And with every shift, there's a war, there's a new war that pushes us to write a new constitution to redistribute power based on the strong reading of what is happening. So clearly, these are not enduring or stable dichotomies. They change a lot, and contrary to what we think, if we just have a longer look at history, it's very clear that these things keep on changing. So why base a policy prescription on something that is so unstable? The idea is really that diversity breeds violence. So whenever we have a society that is diverse, we should be scared because it can, flip anytime. And again, this is not true. I mean, wars are not social explosions. A civil war is not just it's not a social explosion. It's definitely a political decision. Wars require funding and arms and leaders and fighters and people who are trained. So it doesn't just happen overnight. So thinking that just the fact that we have diversity will put us at risk is doesn't make sense. I'm more in favor of using the word sectarianization than sectarianism, because the ism is gives the impression that it's fixed and it's natural. Sectarianization means there's an active effort at sectarianizing, and I think this is a better way to look at it. And a very simple comparison, if we think Protestant Catholics in the US, Protestant Catholics in Northern Ireland, why is it a religion here and why is it a sectarian divide there? There's an active effort at politicizing it there, right?
It's a distinction here between how someone is, in some cases, how someone's going to respond to an outsider, where it's just like, okay, here's the easy narrative for you to consume, versus what is the reality of an extraordinarily complex situation. That for some it can be hard to digest, for some it can be hard to think about aspects of that when we talk about families or communities who fought each other.
If we make the analogy between racism and sectarianism, because the way I understand sectarianism is that it's a system of discrimination, right? And not because religious diversity is a different phenomenon, of course, right? But I'm talking about sectarianism in terms of the politicization of sectarianism and the division into different sects to then be used. So the way I'm thinking about it is that to really break down this this meta category of sectarianism, we need to think about its different facets. And so the same way we talk about legal racism is different from economic racism, it's different. They all feed into each other somehow, but they're different phenomena, right? And I think we should start doing this with sectarianism in order to really understand what is it that we're talking about. Research shows that in cases where you have state welfare, there's no room for non-state welfare, clientelism. And so it's very difficult for those ethnic or sectarian entrepreneurs to be able to instigate sectarian conflict. There is sectarianism from above, but there's also sectarianism from below, and they feed into each other in those mechanisms of, clientelism, etc. So I think it's important for us to look at that. And what you were mentioning about journalists who travel in these different places, how things get covered, is very important because this is how narratives are shaped. But this is also, I would also say that it's also, civil society that reproduces those narratives. It's activists in many cases. It's people who have good intentions. It's not just, it's not just a vile project. It's not a conspiracy of like they're coming to get us. It becomes part of our everyday life, and these narratives become so readily available. It's like fast food. It's an easy, right? It's an easy way of describing what is happening, and then it becomes a very simplified way. And the more you simplify, the more you buy, the more you can sell a concept, right? The more complex, the more people don't want to listen to you because it's too complicated. But if you tell them, it's easy, it's people hate each other based on identity, great, right? When then the Dahiya becomes equal to Hezbollah, becomes equal to Shia, this is how the process of sectarianization happens. We start to use them all as being the same. But it really depends what is the context in which we're using them. If we're using them to describe how there's a certain party that controls a certain neighborhood, and there are many parties in Lebanon that control different neighborhoods, that's fine, right? And it's quite accurate to say that, we all know the geography of those different parties. But if we're using it to justify bombing Dahiya, that's a different story, right? Because if our target is an organization, then the organization is not the neighborhood. And this is why I'm saying having the right categories or looking at the right unit is at the core of not making those mistakes.